What's up guys, JS2Cents here, and today we're going to take a look at the I hate to use the term new, because this is a BeQuiet Pure Base 500, but they've come out with a bunch of different trims of the 500. So last time we took a look at the 500DX, which was a great airflow case, could fit some pretty decent parts in there. You might have a little bit of issue with some AIOs and certain motherboards and certain length graphics cards and such, but for the most part it was a very well-performing case when it comes to acoustics, airflow, and temperatures. But now we've got the FX. If you guys have been paying attention to the BeQuiet FX line, you know that basically is all about RGB. So they've taken one of their more popular affordable cases and they've kind of like upscaled it to give you, hopefully, a better RGB experience. So we'll talk about it today. EVGA's Z690 classified and Z690 Kingpin motherboards are built with extreme overclocking in mind. With multiple power modes designed for sub-ambient and LN2 cooling along with robust overbuilt VRM setups, the Z690 classified and Kingpin motherboards should be an obvious choice for extreme overclockers everywhere. To learn more, click the sponsored link in the description below. Now the side panel here is tempered glass. In terms of the actual chassis itself, it's going to be exactly the same as a Pure Base 500, 500DX, 500FX, because it is, for all intents and purposes, the exact same chassis. So we're not going to go super into depth today. I almost set that where there's no leg, because I had this muscle memory of a different table. Getting used to new sets, right? But in terms of like the overall dimensions, it's exactly the same. It's a mid-tower that will fit an ATX case, will not fit an ATX motherboard, will not fit an eATX motherboard due to width limitations, especially with this pop-out panel right here. But it'll fit your micro ATX motherboards, your mini ITX motherboards, so on and so forth. But it's a fairly average size, if you will. You can fit a 360 AIO technically in the front. It does have this removable panel right here. Technically, this is the hard drive cage, so let me open up the back and show you. It's kind of modular-esque, if you will. You can sort of configure it to how you want it to fit. Kind of keeping with the BeQuiet tradition, we do have some sound dampening material here on the back side. I'm not sure how effective that really is because it's on the back where there's not a whole lot of sound happening back here. But as you can see, we do have 4 Velcro ties right here that basically just attach to a standard zip tie tab. But this module right here, this is essentially what makes the Pure Base 500 FX the FX. So it gives you 6 4-pin PWM fan headers, as well as 6 ARGB headers. Now 4 of them, as you can see, are already occupied because one of the things that they did was they took their Light Wings fan, which we actually did a review about earlier in the year. So whereas a lot of case manufacturers will take some super basic RGB that doesn't match anything else in their lineup because it's a one-off that's only sold with cases and stuff, BeQuiet took their popular Light Wings fan and just put 4 of them inside of this case. Those 4 fans are hooked up to this control box right here, and so are the ARGB. Now the nice thing about that is this is going to tie into your case or your motherboard. So if we follow the end of these cables here, you'll see you have your typical loadout. So we've got our HD audio, which is garbage. No one should use that because it's going to be a Poppy's crackly mess because of all the interference of RF in your case. But this is an ARGB feed wire. So this wire will plug into the ARGB out on your motherboard. Now pretty much every motherboard these days has this 3-pin loadout. Some will have a JST plug. If for some reason you have an older RGB motherboard that just has a JST out, you can get a JST to a 3-pin header like this adapter that would then make it work. So I've seen some people say, I don't have that header. Any modern motherboard with ARGB is gonna have the 3-pin and the 4-pin, but if you have an older board, you might need the JST adapter. But you have your USB 3.2 Gen 2 header. It's so funny now with all the USB stuff, I just wanna say front side USB-C whatevers it might end up being. Front panel, so you've got power and LED, no reset button, so that's important to note. This is the PWM fan feed wire that goes into the FX hub. So this is gonna go to either, I just recommend putting it to your CPU header, because the CPU header, if you do that, all the fans will be controlled off CPU PWM, so if the CPU sees load, it will ramp up the fans. And then you won't get that stupid annoying error in your BIOS saying, no CPU fan detected. And then every time you update your BIOS or you get some power failure and it decides to forget itself, you're not having to go into BIOS and continue to disconnect that. You could also put it to AIO, you could put it to high amp or whatever, it doesn't matter. It could be a standard chassis header if you want, because it's not pulling all of the power from this header, like you're not feeding all the fans through this header. It's actually getting power through a SATA power plug right here. So as you can see, the plugs going into that are these three guys right here: ARGB, PWM, and SATA power. So this is essentially what makes the FX the FX. Then of course you got your standard USB 3.0 plug right there. Now let's talk about a couple of other things here. In terms of accessories, so you've got your motherboard standoff screws, you get some zip ties, you get a standoff Phillips adapter so that you can use a screwdriver to install the standoffs and take them off. You get your hard drive, like SSD screws on there, which are your, what, M3s I think they are. Very basic. And then you get 4 of your power supply adapter plugs on the back. Speaking of power supply, you can see right here, it is a threaded adapter plate. So you can take this off, you mount this to your power supply, run all your cables into your power supply, run them through the hole, and then you can slide it in and then attach this guy down. Makes it a little bit easier than trying to deal with getting the screws lined up and using a screwdriver to get your, your power supply installed. So there's that. You do have right here a toolless hard drive cage. So this gives you an ability to be able to mount, there it is right there, it just pulls out. You can mount 2 3.5-inch hard drives right here. So if you're running big storage drive, some actual hard drive, 4 terabyte, 8 terabyte, 10, 14 terabyte, whatever. You can fit 2 of them in here. You could fit 2 SSDs technically in here. I mean, you can see you do have a hole right there, the holes that line up for the SSD right there on the bottom. And then you could put, I don't know, controllers, whatever else in there. But the thing is, you have to make a choice. You have to remove that to get access to this opening right here, which you would need for the depth of a radiator. You would also probably need to take this off if you were gonna do a custom water cooling loop. That way you could fit a rad there and probably a reservoir and such right here. But in terms of SSD mounts, you do have 2 more on this plate right here. So this BeQuiet logo actually pops out if you need to for some reason. Gives you a little access hole right there. I'm not entirely sure what you would use that for to take it out, but there it is. So you can take this guy out, mount your SSDs, and it's funny, SATA SSDs for a while there, they were going kind of the pathway of having RGB and stuff on them. So if you were going with another blingy RGB build, you could put your RGB SSDs on this guy and then put that back on there. So we'll take that out, and that out, so you can see how it's kind of coming apart. The rest of it's fairly straightforward. As you can see, the basement here has tons of room for a long PSU if you have a longer PSU. Fortunately, as PSU tech has improved, the wattages get higher while the PSU stays shorter. So now you can get 1,000 watt, 1,200 watt power supplies that are no longer than an old 500 or 600 watt, which is kind of nice. So you don't have to worry about taking this out just to fit your cables if you have a high wattage power supply. In terms of ventilation, plenty of ventilation on the bottom. If you go fan down, you have a mesh dust filter, as you can see here, and then plenty of perforation to bring air through the bottom. The standoff on the feet give you about a solid inch or about 22 to 24 millimeters of intake space all around the case. That way you're not dealing with too shallow of a gap between the desk surface of the floor and your power supply ventilation, so you get plenty of air to it. If you were gonna be going fans up, let's say maybe you were gonna be setting this on some, I don't know, shag carpet's back for some reason. Don't ask me why, but it is. So if you're gonna be setting this on like shag carpet because you're Austin Powers, I guess, I don't know. You could go fan up and there's plenty of perforations right in here that would allow it to get air from the main, chassis component area of the case. If you think about the value of having a case that you don't have to take the fans out and just toss them in the bin because of the fact that they tend to be garbage fans that come with cases, like I said, even premium brands that will include fans with their case, I think manufacturers have just got it in their head, they're gonna just throw them away anyway. We need to throw in 1 or 2 $2 junk fans just so it looks appealing, because you get something for the cost of the case. But then you go to match the fans for your build and you can't, because the fans that come with the case are like black sheep step cousins of whatever fan they're based on, but they don't look the same. Heck, they don't even work on the same controller. Corsair, I'm gonna throw you under the bus here. I don't know if a lot of people know this. You take your Commander Pro or your Commander Core, and then you take 2 different types of fans. Like say you take like a light loop, and then you take the basic fans that come out of their cases and you put them on the same controller. For whatever reason, they don't work. And I've dealt with this a ton of times. So you would have to use whatever little controller comes inside the case for those fans, and then the core for the other fans, and then it just gets all kinds of convoluted and garbaged inside of IQ. So like even their own Commander Core thing doesn't even work with the case fans the same way they do with their standalone fans. So it becomes extremely annoying. And that's the nice part about the BeQuiet fans also just being a standard 3-pin ARGB header, is they will work with any ARGB header. That's a 3-pin or a JST adapter. So that's kind of nice to see. And they're really good fans. We did a whole video on these fans, and I'm telling you right now, it's surprising how much air they move and how quiet they are. Anyone that's used any sort of light wings or the silent wings or any of the fans from BeQuiet know they are like Noctua level fans. Last but not least, let's go and talk about the top. You have a magnetic fan filter, and not a flimsy one. It actually has a plastic frame, and you can see in the corners there's actually glued in like rare earth magnets sitting there.
Yeah, bitch! Magnets!
And then in terms of buttons, there's that USB 3.1, whatever. It's USB-C, USB 3.0, power button, front side microphone, headphone, and then this button does tie into the FX there. If you're using the motherboard RGB control, then the case will sync with it. If not, then you can use that button to cycle through the different RGB modes that are built into the controller. You're gonna have your typical things like rainbow, you're gonna have your breathing, you probably have your flashing mode, they'll probably have some sort of marquee mode, and then changing your colors, static color, fading colors, all the basic modes that you would find. But if I can figure out how to get the front off right here, I wanna kinda take a look at how this RGB is attached. I wanna say this is a contact pad sitting in there. Usually you just pull. Okay, I don't think it broke. All right, I was right. They're a little, you know, when you're not sure, pull harder. Or if it doesn't go in, just push harder. That's how I ended up with 2 kids.
That joke never gets old.
So there's the 3-pin contact pads right there, and then the RGB is actually contained inside of this strip, which then glows through the front of the case right there. And this is just it's just tied into that FX controller there. So that's also how you get to your magnetic fan filter here to blow out the dust and such. And then here are your 3 Lightwings fans sitting right there. And they are, what I like about the fans is the RGB, it's not super in your face, it's just this nice translucent ring that has some nice effects that will show up. But you can see though, it does fit 140mm fans. I'm trying to figure out who would buy this case and then take these fans out and change them because they're so good. I would honestly just end up adding more Lightwings fans to the top and whatever AIO you're using. And then speaking of AIO, you can see you can fit on the top a 240 or a 280. The thing is the 280 can tend to start getting in the way of the 24-pin connector, which is gonna be right up here. If you have one that's I mean, they're all pretty much about 30 mil thick rads. But again, then you have to start thinking about things like what's the Z-axis height of your heat sink on your motherboard and such. 240, it's gonna be your best bet in terms of fitment. The thing is, believe it or not, that could actually start limiting what CPU you use because so many Intel CPUs now are so hot, like the 12900K running on a 240, you'd still might even have to do a slight undervolt just to keep the temperatures from getting up into the 90s, even on water. So that's a downside. If you're running Ryzen, 240 is gonna be fine on just about any of the Ryzen CPUs. So there you go, guys. There's sort of our high-level look at the BeQuiet Pure Base FX based on the,
Purely?
I'd be disappointed if you weren't running an AMD FX processor in the Pure Base FX. Dude, the case would have more performance than the CPU. But yeah, like I said, just a high-level look of the Pure Base FX or 500FX to see what makes it FX, and this whole round of BeQuiet launches this summer has been all about RGB. Tastefully done. I love cases that have RGB controllers in there that are agnostic. They're not forcing some, I mean, I guess they can't, right? You can't have a case force you into some software. Corsair. I digress. It's a good case, plenty of airflow, 4 really good fans that you are not gonna throw away. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if half the cost of this entire case is the fans, to be honest. It's not a super expensive case. They put some good non-junk fans in there. Add 2 more on the top or put your cooler in there, fit your high-end components, plenty of airflow, plenty of mesh. It's BeQuiet. They're known for high performance, high airflow, and low noise. That's what you're looking for in a case. Then look down the description below and you'll find a link to this case and you guys can go and check it out. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. A lot of people have been enjoying case reviews lately because I feel like a lot of folks are not just building new systems as we move into this insane launch season that's about to happen. It's also just a way to freshen up your build if you maybe didn't spend a lot of money on a case and you went with higher end components, which is a recommendation I would always recommend. Don't Don't put lower end components in there to afford a more expensive case. Get the best components you can afford, get the cheaper case that you can afford that still fits those components, has plenty of airflow, and then upgrade your case later, which I think a lot of people are doing now. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new around here, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.